This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Confronting the Line, where we're here really to explore the line between exploitation and transformation, between what's helpful and what's hurtful in the personal development and wellness industries. And I'm Ann L. Peterson, your host, and today I'm super excited to welcome Brandie Hadfield. I learned about Brandy, part of my own process and coming to realize that I was part of an exploitive group, was actually a leader in that group, was listening to a lot of podcasts, watching a lot of documentaries and things like that. And mostly I did that because I have always done that. I'm kind of interested. But then I started to notice that's familiar. Oh, that's familiar. Oh, that other thing's familiar. And so somewhere along that way, I ran into you, Brandy, and probably on Serendipy's show, a little bit culty, which just always seemed to every episode that came out every week was like exactly what I needed to hear. It was sort of miraculous. And I really, really am excited to talk to you because you have been outing the harmful practices of the MLM models in the multi-level marketing world. And at the time I originally met you, actually, I didn't even know the depths to which Landmark, the group that I was part of, is founded in MLM. I definitely recognized some of the practices, but now I know that it's deeply, its very foundation is in that whole world. So we'll talk about that as we go along, but that's why I'm super excited. It's taken us months to find the right time to get together. And I know that today's the right time because here we are. So welcome to Confronting the Line.
Thank you so much.
Anything you'd like to say to just introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and excuse me. Sorry.
No worries. And recovering from the flu, so we
Yeah.
have all the room for having you take care of yourself.
And yeah, I actually reached out to Anne after I heard you speak on Serendipy's podcast because when you were sharing your story, it sounded so much like my own experience, like even from working at McDonald's and just having that work ethic and always giving your 200% and working yourself up from very little. I so related to that, like coming from a blue collar town and all of that and working my way up. And so, yeah, I think that our kind of work ethic and belief in good can so be exploited within these kinds of businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been actually really surprising to me that what is the desire to do good, to help, to serve, how that can be used to exploit us. That's probably been the most upsetting discovery of this whole journey for me because I'm like, what? No. So why don't we start by, will you tell us just a little bit of your story? So what happened? How did you sort of come to the place you are now, where you are now a public speaker, a writer, a cult recovery advocate, really speaking out and speaking up about these issues. So what happened? What brought you here?
Yeah. I always, like as far back as I can remember, have been interested in personal development and psychology. And like as a young high schooler, I would read textbooks about psychology just for fun because I found it so fascinating. So I always knew, I always knew that I wanted to get married and be a mom, but I also knew I wanted to do something in a way to be helping other people lead the best lives, whatever that looked like for them. So my first job, as I said, was working at McDonald's, which I actually really enjoyed because I loved serving people.
Fun. I love
Yeah. I love just making
McDonald's.
people's day, it was just, and being busy. So, and I found it to be a very, positive atmosphere all in all. But at a certain point, I realized I was passionate about health and fitness. And these were parts of who I was becoming that weren't being satisfied in that area. So that's when I ended up getting into health and fitness, and I started working at Good Life Fitness, which is a Canadian fitness club chain. And I worked there for almost 10 years and worked my way up again from front desk to head office. The company actually...
Yeah, you have things in common.
Yeah. the company actually paid for me to go to college so that I could get the education that was actually required for the job that I ended up creating for myself, where I saw a gap in the organization. And then when I became pregnant, I thought, I can't see myself working 50 hours a week and traveling across the country and doing all of these things I'd been doing. And I've said this many times before, I never had that conversation with my employer. And I know deep down they would have been accommodating. But to me, this had this standard for myself that I knew I wasn't going to be able to meet, which meant I felt I had to pivot and do something, create something of my own. So that's where I became like the seeker of like, what's next for me in my chapter, in this chapter of life.
I've heard from a few people that have kind of talked about the problems with the MLM direct sales organizations, that young mothers is sort of a really big target market for them. Exactly. I mean, I think you just described it perfectly, right? Like you want to be able to spend time with your kids and be home. And so all of those lures of like making your own schedule and making lots of money and, but on your own time and only working, a few hours a week for, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like all of that is like, of course, it's nirvana when you're in that place.
We don't live in a world where we can really thrive on a single income in most situations. And I had been the breadwinner for so long. So I did need to bring in an income, but I was torn between my desire to stay home and be the primary caregiver for my first baby, I really wanted that, but we needed to bring in money. And you're also grappling with like an identity shift. And like suddenly you're finding yourself, maybe some of your really good friends who are also parenting are doing it a different way. And so you're not seeing eye to eye and you're feeling alone and isolated and like, who am I now? And you're giving so much of yourself to just like the home and your child. And it's like, I want something for me. So you've got all of these things pulling you in these different directions. And then the whole thing with personal development and multi-level marketing is like find the pain point and exploit the hell out of it and pretend to be the answer to all of those things.
Right.
So that's what happened.
Gotcha. So then you got involved with, I'm assuming, some kind of a health and wellness sales product. Can you tell us a little bit about whatever you're comfortable sharing about the organization that you got involved with and how it worked a little bit?
Yeah. So at the time, like when I found myself there, remember I had already been in the health and fitness space. I had already been, I was already taking a greens powder every day. I was all about all of that.
I'm into all of it. I got it.
And so I was looking for like, okay, my idea was that I was going to do coaching and that I would have, and that somehow got this idea planted in me that if I had a product, then it wouldn't just be my time for dollars. I could also have something that I could recommend, which would be like that idea of residual income. Okay, well, I already take a greens powder, and this doctor who is like a parent, also known as a parenting guru, had a health coaching certification. So I took the health coaching certification because the worldview, the ideology of this health and parenting guru was kind of, along the lines of what I was following and reading. So it felt like it was a match. And he was also representing this company called Juice Plus, which is supposed to be encapsulated plant powders. Great. I already recommend that. It already makes sense to me. It's not a far leap. So like with the work ethic that I've always had, I went into it saying, okay, if you're telling me that this is possible, then tell me what to do. I'll do it and I'll make that happen. So a lot of trust, which is a part of who I still am today. I do trust that what people are saying is, I take it for face value. And that's one of the biggest things I think we grieve when we come out of these things, is like the betrayal trauma of people that I really trusted with my livelihood just extracted and extracted and extracted for as long as they could. And when I was done, I didn't exist anymore.
Oh my gosh, you're so describing the world so well. And it's the other piece is, I really do believe that most of the people doing that, like the leaders in those groups, they really do believe their own narrative. Like they really do to some extent, until the higher up you get, the more you can see they don't, that they kind of know. not all of them, but many, right?
Mhm.
But that's one of the things I think this kind of exploitation has become so normal. It's just so normal. I'm offering you an opportunity. It's a great product that's improving people's lives. I've got this commission plan. You can, et cetera, et cetera. But, it doesn't in the landmark or in the personal development world, the way it manifests in our environment was you didn't even get paid. You were just transforming life itself, that
Right.
fixing the problems of the planet. You were getting to be up to something bigger than yourself. There were all these sort of amorphous possibilities.
That's there too. That's there too, for sure. It's called a mission. Like we were told to invite people to our mission. This was no
Right.
longer just plant powders. This quickly became something like a calling, like almost a
Yeah.
religion. And
Yeah.
to speak to the earning income, it's like I even think that's a stretch to say that because you want to be a product of the products. You're paying so much into it to get this like small return. For most people, there is more that you are paying them to have the dubious honor of working for them than you're actually receiving in return. Well, technically you're getting a commission off sales. You're paying so much more than you're receiving.
Right. Right. I think that's an important, we call this confronting the line because it's always my view is if you can find the line, you can see both sides. That whole, what most people don't realize about those kind of organizations is that for the organization, the customer is you,
Mhm.
the salesperson. They are the ones that are buying the most product
Yes.
that are right. And even if there's not a requirement to buy the product,
Mhm.
like what were those stupid leggings that anyway, they
Well,
got in trouble. They
yeah.
made everybody buy the leggings. But a lot of these companies, you don't necessarily have to. But when you're in being encouraged, like you got to represent and you got to da da da, that kind of whole thing. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and there
You
is
gotta
some like, you know, in Good Life Fitness, I knew I would do better at selling personal training packages if I was currently personal training. So I was like, okay, well that makes sense. I got to be a product of the product. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
but
Gotcha.
but then, way out the other side and you're actually looking at how beneficial were these products even? And you realize not
Right.
very. So
Right.
whereas
Well,
personal
I
training
had
is really a totally different thing where you're getting a real service.
I had this big insight. Tony's already heard this like 3 or 4 times, our producer that's listening here. But a couple of weeks ago about because I'm kind of looking around, I've got my companies, but being an entrepreneur is tough, you're doing everything and you've got to get everything going. So I've been, just tapping into a lot of different projects and I keep being invited to do things, kind of startup things
Mhm.
with different people and so on. My skill set, my talents, kind of like yours, really match that. I'm good. I am but definitely the person you want to have in your startup because I will make things happen, can figure it out and all this stuff,
Mhm.
build systems and infrastructure when it doesn't exist and all these things. I had this whole insight the other day because I've been looking for this line. Like, where are these offers to sell this thing or that other thing? Where is that good? Where's that healthy? Where is it not?
Mhm.
And we have another business my husband does, which is real estate development.
Mhm.
And so a term in real estate is equity,
Mhm.
right? So if I'm doing like right now, in fact, we don't know if Riverside's going to cut it out or not. If y'all are hearing construction sounds in the background, it's because they are installing new countertops in my house right now. And but putting in those new countertops, I'm doing that because I'm going to turn around and sell the house. It's equity, right? I'm putting in $20 that this real estate agent told me, $20 about a square foot to, and then I will get about $60 a square foot in return value,
Mhm.
right? So I'm like, okay, fine, we'll invest this last little bit to sell the house. I'm putting in my time, my labor, my money, but I'm putting it into something that I hold the equity in.
Mhm. Mhm.
When I turn around and sell the house, then I'm going to get that back plus some.
Mhm.
What I started to realize as I was fielding these different offers was, wait, they're inviting me to build their equity in return for a potential promise, maybe of a percentage of their sales
Mhm.
in the future.
Mhm.
But I just saw this whole thing. It's like, but wait, if I'm building the equity for that company and I'm not a true stakeholder, I think there's something exploitive about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I
Because that's
agree.
like
Yeah.
building their equity, and yeah, you're getting maybe a
Yeah,
commission.
I
And
had another experience like that, like similarly, where I was hired on to a company to create a curriculum, and I wasn't getting paid to create the curriculum, but the promise was that I would get a percentage of the sales from the future students. And it got to a point where the demands kept increasing for this future promise, and I was like, this is, yeah, this doesn't feel clear, transparent. Like, I don't know exactly what I'm getting out of this. I don't own the intellectual property of it, but I'm building it. And I just backed out. Yeah.
that was so smart. I had a deal with, he's called Yoga Man in my book, but a client that I worked for, and he brought me in to build his manuals and his programs, but he paid me for that.
Mm-hmm.
He paid me well, actually. And the now I'm having a lot of where people are like, okay, well, come and build this thing, and then you can have a percentage of what we sell. Well, who sells? So, and I've been in sales all my life. I understand that. I don't mind working if it's a healthy or generous commission. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you, the organization, with the infrastructure? What are you providing? Back when I learned sales in my 20s, somebody took me under the wing and said, "I'm going to teach you sales because you'll always be able to take care of yourself and your kids," which has turned out to be true.
Mm-hmm.
But she had a store with samples and displays.
Mm-hmm.
She sent me to trainings.
Mm-hmm.
She paid me a stipend based salary that allowed me to cover the basics in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then my commission was what really was the living, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it was fair, and it never changed. Because that's another thing that I've heard a lot is like, even if it starts out as a good offer, as a good deal. This is what Yoga Man, eventually a bunch of his teachers kind of call him out. They have their own podcast, Journey into Yoga Cult. Shout out to that. It's really good. But the main problem with him is he would get these affiliates that were supposed to be able to make money off of his brand, which was sort of kind of true. I mean, it was well known. But then he kept changing the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that's a big thing in the MLM direct sales thing. Like the game changes midway, again and again and again.
On their whim based on their profits. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, is how it's literally exactly everything opposite to what it's promising. So it's promising that you will have your own business, but in reality you have absolutely no control. They have all of the control. They set the prices, they set the create the compensation plan, which can change at any time. The contracts that, if you're one of the very few who makes your way up to a leadership position, which was me, where I had to then, after all the celebrating that I did it, I was given this contract assigned, which is called a covenant, which is
Ooh, that's creepy.
yeah, creepy, exactly. And then it's like, nobody told me there was a covenant, because in any cultic group, they're only going to give you that little bite for you to work that much harder, and then they're just going to keep on giving you only the amount that they need to. And that's not transparency, and that's not being a business owner if it's not a big open book and you're just learning as you go along. That's a huge red flag. And in that covenant, it will say, you have to do X, Y, and Z, Canadian, in order to continue earning the pittance that they've decided that they're going to pay you.
Right. How do you think so one of the things that's in kind of more modern times, so to speak, is this affiliate deals. Like if I sell your product on my website, every time somebody sells it, I can tell you the average affiliate price is about 12%, somewhere between 7 and 12%. How do you think that compares to the typical direct sales or MLM models? Like what's this?
My aunt is a business owner. She has a clothing company in Montreal, and her daughter has started a jewelry company with her mom, and they have affiliates and people who will post on social media about their products. And the difference is that you're not, it's literally a transaction. It's like, here's the code, Brandy 10. It's clear that it's an ad.
You're not being promised
I'm not
that you're
and I don't have to build a relationship with the person putting in Brandy 10 online. I then don't have to somehow like forge this bond with her and invite her to things and keep her plugged in and all of the emotional labor that's involved in multi-level marketing. Affiliate is just like, it's just neat and tidy and no bullshit attached.
right. And it's transparent. Like
Yeah.
it's clear. I appreciate that a lot of people put like, if you buy this, I'm not receiving any compensation. If you buy this, I am receiving compensation.
Yeah.
That's one of the things as we're building the Illuminate Life platform. We do want to get to the place where we're recommending and offering products.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of in our, as we're kind of drafting out, we're architecting right now our plans for how that would look. But that was one of our things that I noticed I thought was a really safe practice, is saying just all the transparency.
Yeah.
The more transparency, the safer it is, because the more authentic and real choice is actually there.
Yeah. And something that people need to be aware of is that a lot of these multi-level marketing companies are getting wise to the fact that people are speaking out about them. So they're saying, oh, we have an affiliate option. So it's like, okay, I can just be an affiliate. But the deal is that there's not one person that has ever made a significant income from affiliate sales. Like, so it's like, I don't know. To me, it feels like a trick. It feels like a language loophole to say that we've got this option, but like, I don't buy it. I haven't seen any evidence that it's legitimate and that they're not just using it as like, okay, you don't like that? How about this? What if I could remove your objection? Then would you recommend our product? But the hope is always that you'll invest further and you'll be part of the community and you'll catch the vision, go to conference and all of the other, like I said, bullshit relational stuff that's attached.
That's a whole other thing that I think, and I find myself even challenged with this, is the abuse of the idea of community. So here we are this interdependent species. Human beings are, sorry guys, we are, even in the United States. So we are dependent on Canada. I just want to go on record. So we are interdependent in terms of all kinds of things. But this whole idea of, join the community. I have, and look, I have a women's community, right? And we were going to take that name out of it because we just are like, no, but we don't mean that icky exploitive kind. We just actually mean like a group of women getting together and sharing and talking and exploring and learning. And you don't have to buy anything ever, so then we have to put this whole long sentence after the word community now, because it's been so trashed.
Yeah.
It's just so commodified.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I mean, isn't that, to me, that's in the landmark circle, that's a big part of why people don't leave. Why, people are like, why don't you? Well, because that's my whole community.
Yeah. And that's a survival. That's like your survival instinct. So you're coming up against that. And like, I was just speaking on a podcast yesterday where I was talking about how like I've been married, I've been with my husband since the year 2000, like more than half my life. And two of my best friends, one I've known since I was 16 and one since I was 8 years old. So I had those like protective factors in place where I had people who love me, and not everybody has that. And that's, so the question that I was asked about was like, how do you get somebody out of one of these things? And it's like, well, that's not necessarily going to be the most psychological safe option for them, because it really depends on what and who do they have to fall back upon. So it really has to be up to them.
There's a lot of misunderstanding in the realm of choice. Like, because people say, well, you have a choice to participate or not. But is it choice really when your survival is dependent, your emotional, your spiritual, your psychological, or your financial survival? I mean, I kept doing business with the, hosting Warner and Gang. This is what my book's about, is telling the story about that. I hosted for 2 years after I knew about the abuse, because I was heavily financially entangled.
Yeah.
It took that long to just get to zero.
Yeah.
I had to get to zero to get out, and have that and then have something, some kind of opportunity that going forward. So choice is an interesting thing, where do we really have choice, when what? And if I'm enticed into something, but not given the information, is that really choice?
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's not informed consent. And then you have the whole sunk cost fallacy where you've invested how many years of your life, how many dollars, and you have to grapple with that. And like, is everybody ready to necessarily? Like, we can't speak for everyone. We can only speak for ourselves. And so for
Mm.
me, it was taking time off social media because this inner voice within me was like, you and your family are all separated under the same roof. Like, you need to reconnect. And so I did that. And as soon as I did and quieted all of the voices of indoctrination that I was constantly plugged into every single day, that's when things started to shift.
Mm.
And then I was like, I can't go back. I need more time off. I need more time off. And then the more time I took and the more my inner voice got louder, the more difficult, the more I realized I can never go back. But then it's like, now what though? This has been my identity for the better part of a
So
decade.
is that how, that's what I was going to ask you, as it sounds like, how did you break up or wake up, as they say? I kind of don't like that term, waking up, because it's not like that. I
Yeah.
mean, not in my, it's a very
Yeah.
slow
Yeah.
awakening.
It's like a
I mean,
crack. And then some
I like
light gets
slow
in.
mornings, but so how did, yeah, what kind of brought you out of it? Was it, what had you kind of go start to second
Yeah.
guess? I was struck when I was reading your LinkedIn thing this morning that it sounded like you had gotten to a pretty decent level of success, all things considered,
Yeah.
and then kind of woke up. That's how you described it on there. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did your waking up go?
Yeah. So it wasn't very long where I was actually making, a few $1,000s a month. There was a very short period when you look at my whole journey it was just the small period of time where I was finally making it, which coincided with hitting a burnout wall partway through the pandemic, like well into the pandemic. And when I took time off, I'd been hustling so hard for so many years, like doing all of the things to the best of my ability. Like,
Mhm.
for example, we used to have these like bingo cards that we would submit every month of like activity. Like, if you do, these are the things that will ensure your success. Having an event, booking a three-way call, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And
At Landmark, it's called the required opportunity work.
okay. So you're supposed to check it off if you did these things. Well, mine would be like I would write on 43 because I would do everything to the like maximum. So I was invested. And when I stopped grinding and busy, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? One of the things I did was I read this book called Wintering, which is about like power of rest and retreat during difficult times. Because I thought, okay, it's a pandemic. It's been hard for everybody. So that's probably what's going on. So I gave myself permission to slow down was like the first thing. And then like, what do I want to read? I can read anything I want right now. This is about me. So what do I want to read? And I started just doing what I wanted and what I was drawn to without any external voices telling me what to do. And then I found myself like falling into the world of I watched The Vow, and then I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that caused a lot of, it's interesting because in the pandemic, I mean, I think you've read my books, a little bit sharper of an exit in that basically they booted me out.
Mhm.
They threatened to sue me, all this stuff, right? So like kind of dropped me off in the middle of nowhere and then threatened to sue me.
Mhm.
So, and then also finding out about the real abuse and employment exploitation that was going on, like in vivid detail in a
Mhm.
way that was unavoidable, right? So that was this huge shock to the system. But honest to God, I don't know if that even would have been enough if it hadn't have been for the break. So it's interesting what you're saying, because for me, it was the pandemic. I had to put my businesses, which I was in kind of start over mode after releasing. I had decided no more clients, no more sociopathic gurus. I was going to change the model of business. I wanted to come work with small people, people who were just starting up, who had wisdom. I wanted to provide what I was providing for these already famous people, but for people that weren't there, that just had some really great difference making wisdom. So I have this whole idea, this whole plan. But I'm relying on my reputation of having been able to do that for all these other people.
Mhm.
And then the pandemic hits, and my husband and I started road tripping. So we had just bought our beach property up in Seattle, and we live in Dallas. So I'm like, we're just going to road trip. And something really shifted. And that, as you're describing it, I can hear like it was the quiet.
Mhm.
Like all of a sudden, you're not, um, yeah, you're not having to make 10 phone calls today or send out 5 emails or get on these 5 social platforms and da 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 da, all this stuff
Mhm.
do now to build a business, any business. Um, yeah, that's that quiet. That's a really, I think that's, I haven't heard that before actually, but I think that's a really important thing that you're saying. I want to like highlight, underline, and circle that because I can
Mhm.
see how much that aided me too. And
Mhm.
then of course during that time, yeah, I'm watching the exactly the same, watching the
Yeah.
vow, watching. It was only recently that I could watch the Leah Remini stuff about Scientology, but
Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. So it gets quiet and you start realizing that there's no, like, this isn't
I
working.
can't go back. And
Mm,
it's like now then I'm realizing this is why they say, oh, the key to success is like always being plugged in and going to every event. You got to go to, like, why they push that so hard is because if you're constantly surrounded with this social influence, then it is going to keep you stuck for
right.
however long. So that break was really a death sentence in terms of my continued commitment to the group.
Mm,
So then I became depressed because
mm,
I realized I couldn't go back. Like I just couldn't unsee what I had seen now. I couldn't just pretend none of that existed. I couldn't just pretend anymore that the work was enjoyable because it wasn't. And I was admitting that for
mm.
the first time to myself. The work sucks. I hate prospecting. I hate having
Right.
to turn my kids into content every day and like do this attraction marketing and make people feel, like present myself in this like pious way and make people feel like I want that, that didn't feel
Mm,
good. I started to feel like I'm doing harm here. And I didn't see it that
mm,
way for a long time. I thought I'm part of this great, wonderful secret that everybody needs to know about. And I'm changing lives. And now I was seeing it through this lens of I'm causing harm. And I couldn't unsee that. And so my husband is like, okay, uh, you worked for less than nothing for how long?
What's the, I just want to get clear because you said I'm causing harm. Can you say
Mhm.
explicitly what the harm is?
Yeah.
When you said it, like, what harm are you pointing to?
Okay. Well, harm, there's the harm of like my children of like they're not consenting spokespeople to an MLM supplement company. So
Gotcha.
that's one whole huge piece, which is very
Okay.
much encouraged in multi-level marketing. Like they would literally say like pimp out your kids, ha ha ha, like because it's cute, you
Really?
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I couldn't do that anymore. They
Okay.
were also getting older and they were like, I don't want to do that. And when I took that break, they were like, ooh, as well. And so I couldn't go back to that. So there's that, all
Mm,
of that. And
okay.
then there's like the people who are watching and feeling bad because they can't stay home. They'd like to stay home with their kids. They don't know what's happening behind closed doors and how hard mommy is actually hustling and how I'm painting a picture that isn't really
Mm,
truly reality. So they're feeling bad
okay.
about themselves and feeling like, I would have people that would be like, I really wish I could join, but I can't because of whatever.
There's a funny, the Seek Safely folks who I collaborate with and, a massive fan and advocate for. I mean, I'm doing all this honestly to help build the Seek Safely movement. That's what drives me. And they had a fantastic episode they put out last week, and they talked about all these influencers and all these people selling all this stuff, and they're on Instagram and they're like on these private planes and they're have their champagne glasses and all this and that. And they're going, most of that's a green screen. Like it's not even actually real.
Yeah.
It's sort of
You're
mocked
you're you're
up
just
in
like
order.
you're just like like whatever you're trained to say like because of this company, like you're framing everything good in your life that is because of this company. So my husband's
Oh yeah,
actually,
that's in the landmark culture too. I mean,
oh
and
yeah,
and most of the landmark saved my life because of landmark.
yeah,
Because of landmark, rather than owning yourself as the source of
yes.
your own growth and development, you're always giving the credit to the external thing that even if that doing that external thing did help, that's not the source.
And reframing your whole life experience is how shitty it was before this wonderful opportunity came to you. So you're painting this picture of like this hero's journey, which is your
Yeah.
story that you must
Right.
always be sharing.
Right.
And so that's not fully true. And so I was also beginning to look at social media as like just,
Mm,
an ugly place to be spending so much time as well. So that felt harmful to myself, to other people. How
Mm.
could I recruit people to do all of these things? How could I honestly look somebody in the eyes and say that if I can do it, you can do it? Like, what did I actually do anyway? Like, I'm looking at that differently, you know? So, harm on
So that
many
all, I
levels.
can see how, yeah. So it's like harm with the kids, harm to yourself. I can really hear the harm to yourself, like your own emotional and
Hmm.
mental well-being, so to speak,
Hmm.
as well. And all for this promise, sounds like you're about to tell us that your husband kind of points out wasn't true for the majority of the
Well,
time.
he was saying like, they promised residual income. And so maybe now you can get that promise that took 10 years to be delivered on. Like, ride it out. Just don't do anything or do the very, very minimum and ride it out. And at one point, I
Right.
actually reached out to Sarah Edmondson. I reached out to a few people and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm bumping up against my morals here. Like, what I need to do to take care of my family and knowing what I know now. So Sarah was really lovely and just basically like, you got to do what you got to do. You got to take care of your family. And, she was kind. But as I verbalized it more times to more people, it became clear that I had to cut the ties. I couldn't do it. Like, I was feeling sick when I would get paid. So I
Mm.
realized, okay, I could just like babysit children. If I just babysit this amount of children, this amount of hours a week, then I'll come close to what this income is now, as it's crumbling like quicksand so quickly anyways. So that's what I
Gotcha.
proposed to my husband. I said, I'm going to babysit. And he was like, I can see, I'm hearing you. You can't do this anymore. Because at first he was nudging me and then he was realizing, okay, no, this is not, she's, her soul's being destroyed. Yeah. That's what I
So
did
I'm
at
curious
first.
about that because mostly the direct sales is what I was told was like the new and modern MLM, kind of word. But there is this promise like you build this downline of other people, and so it sounds like that didn't really happen. So when you slowed down, that those
Well,
people weren't producing. Like
because,
how?
well,
Why
they
did?
say it's a relationship business, and that's true. Like, the reality is there's not an actual huge demand for encapsulated fruits and vegetables. It's what they're buying is the hope. So the truth is really in plain sight. So if you're not pumping hope up everybody's ass, then they aren't wanting to really take it anymore, and they're dwindling
Right.
away very quickly.
I
So the
got
hustle
it.
never
Wow.
never stops. So there's never any like, you'll reach this point and then, which is the kind of part of the vision that's painted. I've talked to people who've made it to the tippy top and realized, no, like, you literally can't retire. You have to do this till you die. There's no end. And also, like I said, the covenant, that there was a new covenant that was released after I left, which said if you don't commit to certain activity, you will not get, there is no residual income anymore. It doesn't exist anymore because you have to
Oh wow.
maintain activity, at least within Juice Plus. That's the way that
Yeah.
it is now.
Yeah. Well, probably because they've figured out, like you said, they've figured out, no, it's a matter of the relationships and keeping it going and so on. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. And then you cut ties. So when you cut ties, what did you do with your whole like downline, so to speak? Like, because it sounds like you actually cut and said, no, 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 I don't want to have anything to do with
Yeah,
this.
I have to resign. I said, I'm not renewing my distributorship because my distributorship would be renewed in May. And so when it came time to renew it, I said, I'm not going to be renewing it. And so what they do then is your downline just like rolls up to your upline. So then it
Gotcha.
was like, okay, what do I say to these people? How do I deal with all of these relationships? So at
That's
first,
a big thing people are dealing with as we're talking about not participating at Landmark anymore, which isn't hard because Landmark's kind of going out of business.
uh,
But that's been a big question is like, but what do I say to all my friends that still think it's the best thing since it saved their lives, And now that I see maybe it didn't, maybe I saved my life and, I got some good tools there, but it's not what it promises to be.
mhm,
Because that's another thing I think that's another corollary here
mhm,
in these personal development promise organizations. There are these big promises. You are going to be transformed. You are going to be the most productive, effective person there is. You're going to have a leg up on the rest of humanity because you have these insights, you have these breakthroughs, you have these tools that literally make you a more effective, productive, connected human being. And if you're in there long enough, you start looking back and you go, I don't think so. And if you start to mix with people that aren't in the group and you see that they have all that, but they're not doing all this work and sacrificing, then you kind of go, I mean, I really credit my neighborhood book club with a lot of my own waking up, because I'm like around the table with all these amazing women and none of them are doing personal development work, and they have their lives are working fabulously, you know, because it's anyway. So it was quite the moment. Whoa. Yeah. So you rolled up you resigned.
Yeah. I talked to my best friend, the one I've been best friends with since second grade, and I said, what do I say to these people that I've recruited? I feel I owe them an explanation. And she said, well, they didn't consent to you going in and blowing up their world. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. I can't just I figured this out, and therefore you have to be on my timeline and feel the same way at the same time. So that was kind of like what I'm saying. I don't know what they've got in terms of community and all of that necessarily, that they're going to feel okay to step out just because this is when that I've decided to, and when I've accumulated all of this information and read all of these books that they haven't yet. So the first thing I did was I started to leave, I left breadcrumbs, I guess, would say little things. Like one of the people that were in my downline said, anybody have any book recommendations on their Facebook? And I recommended some books and put in Cultish, one of the books. Oh, yes. Just little things. I was trying to just plant seeds, or I wouldn't talk about multi-level marketing, but I'd talk about attraction marketing and how I felt that was inauthentic, or certain pieces of it, just trying to safely open the door to say hey, if anybody wants to talk, I'm showing you I'm open to questioning this whole set of beliefs that I promoted for so many years. So one person in particular, I took her out for lunch because geographically we're close and we could do that. And I just had her talk first and said, how are you feeling about your business? And as she started to express her doubts, I validated that. And then I brought out a book that I had read, which was highlighted. I started showing her things. Right. Because one of the things in these groups is they train you to tell on each other and screenshot conversations and send it to the upline. And there's a lot of tattletaling and self-policing that happens. So I wanted to be safe and not be slapped with some legal trouble because I was being a disruption in the field. That was the other thing I was concerned about. So I was trying to kind of leave the breadcrumbs and leave the door open and be available.
And then in the landmark world, you're incomplete. Oh, and she's just really incomplete. And or you have a racket, right? So they take the distinctions that are the product in that world and use those to kind of deflect. They're I always picture Captain America and his shield. She's incomplete, and so then the problem is over there. And, I'm very clear I'm not incomplete. In fact, probably the completest I've ever been. But I do also recognize that that's kind of a safety mechanism sometimes for people until they're ready to question.
Yeah, to just dismiss.
That's why I kind of wrote my book the way I did, which is I call my book an amuse-bouche. That tiny little thing they bring out on a spoon before the meal to sort of wet your palate. Because I knew too, and I know so much now that I didn't know even when my own book came out. Because for a year now, you've been telling me their stories, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, the onion that just keeps peeling.
3 more books now of information. So, but yeah, even for myself, I had to do those little breadcrumbs.
Yeah. And then the final thing I did was I wrote an open letter to my team and posted on my Substack. I thought, if they want to read it, it's there. I know if it was me, I'd be Googling. So it's available. And then some people are still in to this day, years later, just peripherally, just for the community, just there.
Well, I'm curious, do you think, so total transparency, I'm a Shackley distributor. Now, I have been a Shackley distributor since, I don't even know when, because a good friend of mine, actually, we had this whole conversation about cleaning products, and I had gotten very into healthy living, and they have very clean products. And I've just known lots of people who use Shackley. I've liked Shackley products forever and ever. And I was like, oh, wait, I can get a discount if I'm a distributor? Great. I've never sold Shackley to, and I said, I'm like, I'm not creating a business. And they're like, it's actually been really great. They're like, well, that's fine. Like nobody's trying to get me to create a business at all. So I have my little Shackley order and I have my little clean products and I like them and it, whatever I buy, but I'm buying for myself. And from time to time, if somebody like my daughter or something says something, I'm like, oh yeah, I can order that for you. And we get a 30% discount. Like for me, it was all about the discount. That was like kind of the beginning, middle, and end. And I like the products. And so I'm just curious if you think that those kinds of organizations, can it be done in a way that isn't harmful? Or is it just
no? Because I think the only reason why it's not harmful is because it's not being done the way that it's meant to be done. So it's kind of like the way that I look at it is because I've had people say, well, like, how do you know your diamond isn't a blood diamond? Or what about your phone and the parts of your phone? That's not ethical. So how can you go around with a smartphone then if you're all about ethical practices? And it's like I had a certain experience that led me to uncover things that I feel a moral obligation to expose. And I don't personally feel like I would ever want to give a portion of my income to any of those types of companies. And if something else comes on my radar, like if I become aware of something that's highly unethical, then I won't support that within the confines of like existing as a human in the Western world. Like, can I do my life and have my business without a smartphone? No, not without making it incredibly hard for myself. But can I buy cleaning products that aren't part of an MLM and try to be conscious about where, with what my values are in terms of chemicals, production, labor, how the labor is treated? I can make those choices to an extent. So that's my view on it. And also I know in multi-level marketing, like there's nothing to say that some upline down the road isn't going to print a report and try to pluck you out from rating fan customer to rep with a vision. Because I know that would happen. They get desperate and they print the
there's
report.
definitely been invitations for that, because different people, and I'm like, no, I don't, no. I shop in this store because I like these products.
Yeah.
And I have researched the history enough to feel comfortable and so on. So I like what you're saying about personal choice, but going back to what we said earlier, personal choice comes with information. What's the information? And, and is there transparency? So that's one of the big issues that I've found with, Landmark in particular, is so much was hidden about Warner, the foundation, which, by the way, I think I told you before I started, like with Keith Raniere and so many of these guys, guess what his foundation was? MLMs.
Yeah.
He sold the Euler encyclopedias and then had a vitamin business, which happened to be Shackley.
And I heard that
as well.
Forrest Shackley like got his start like lifting hollow weights at like a circus like health show. And I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. Like he was fraud. He was a fraudster before he started Shackley. And then I think his like formula, like his alfalfa pills, I think is like what Juice Plus borrows from. Like I think like they're like a granddaddy, like almost like Amway.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how S was to all the personal development. It was because Warner and S got famous. So then everybody started copying that, including, by the way, Tony Robbins, like all those guys all rode on the coattails of what happened with S. And so that whole industry was born, not the entirety of the human potential movement, which is the bigger bucket it sits in. L. Ron Hubbard, I think, really gets to own the grandfather role of that. And then he had his influencers before that, but it's this ongoing thing. What do you think about that, the overlap between MLMs? Like some of the subtleties have come up in our conversation, but what do we think are the real like direct line overlaps between the MLM culture and the personal development culture, besides they rely on each other?
Yeah, I think exploiting vulnerability is the number one. And nobody is immune to that. So if anybody thinks like they are immune to that, they just haven't met the right match for whatever.
Most at risk.
Yeah.
I love Nippy Ames, and we both have Sarah and Nippy as friends in common, and the podcast A Little Bit Culty is just essential for anybody looking to deconstruct this stuff, but that you, yeah, you don't, yeah, it's just nuts. That you don't join a high control group, you do not join a cult, you do not join up to be exploited.
Yeah.
Although I can see places and times in which in a certain transaction, you might know that the exchange is not balanced and can be extractive or exploitive. And you could make that choice to do that. I mean, people do that all the time, but mostly they're not choosing that. They are being coerced with some false promise or some sort.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then there's the peer structure too. So what's interesting is by the time Est becomes landmark, so Est, he definitely builds Est on the foundation of direct sales. In fact, that's where they train the early trainers, or sorry, the early leaders and staff, is by being out selling encyclopedias, selling vitamins, selling whatever, because that's bringing in the money. But then, and this is one of the things that literally Werner has been credited as being the genius that blended MLM and personal development, because what he did was he got the license for the mind dynamics work, which was an early personal development thing. And but he started selling it with all the same techniques that made the other business successful. Have events, and get people excited about it, and then all the sales tactics and things in terms of exactly how you position things in the room. Like it's a whole exacting process that was very much developed in the MLM structure for, like, how do you get somebody to let you in the door and let you show the encyclopedias, and so those tactics that make you successful in MLM. So he basically deploys those, but the product now, instead of encyclopedias, instead of vitamins, is workshops. That's the product. And then, quite by accident, I mean, they still don't admit that they're a large group awareness training. But so we're now understanding what that does to your brain and the dopamine high. And so now you're like literally on this mythological high. And of course, you want everybody to have that.
Yeah.
And we can see the overlap with that in the wellness industry. Like, oh, you just take these pills, you're going to be getting the vitamins and minerals, blah, 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 that you need.
Or in the conferences and seeing the people share their stories on stage, and you're like, and all of the production and like the scheduling that they do in these conferences. Like I talk about how I'd be like, yay, I'm going to Dallas, or I'm going to Sacramento, or all these places, but I barely saw outside. Like I was in a convention center all day, all night.
That's so true. Yes, I know. I used to travel because I led programs all over, and I did, because I led in the fun division. I did manage to get some fun in and do some. And one of the distinctions that I taught was play. So I had to do some playing. Okay. So I really totally. My joke always is I was in the Kauai of Landmark. I was in the happy place. Yeah. But yeah, all those tactics then just become, the product becomes that. But here's the genius. I mean, Machiavellian genius. He gets people to sell the product for no commission. I always tell Sarah, I'm like, at least you got commission. Like when you sold a Nexium program, you got commission.
You just got promised like a breakthrough, like the value of like changing the world.
Well, and if you did it well enough, then you could become a program leader. But you don't get paid to the first several levels of program leader. That's not true anymore. Now they do pay. But get this, the pay scale, last I heard, was, my intel is probably a couple of years old, but you get paid minimum wage for the state that you're in. So like if you're in Kentucky versus Washington State doing the exact same role, you're getting minimum wage for that, whatever that state's minimum wage is, for a set prescribed amount of hours to get the job done. And it's not realistic. Everybody who's doing it knows it's not realistic. They're always doing hours beyond the hours that the contract says they'll be paid for. And then there's way, way, way less of those now because their volunteer program got nixed for, anyway, a variety of reasons. We're working on that. We think we found the lawsuit that finally nixed it. Mm-hmm. But because it turns out it is not legal in the United States to have people managing your business operations as a training program, volunteerism. So anyway, so to me, it's more like in the personal development world, the employment practices or the assisting practices, the carrot is you're going to be a leader. You're going to be that. You want to be a form leader? You got to learn to enroll and register people. When you enroll and register this many people, then you can become a seminar leader. And then you can, and then, but it's always the statistic is registering
Yeah.
people, finding people to put in the programs and putting them in. And you're doing that for free most of the time to eventually get to the place where you can make minimum wage.
Yeah.
It's all for the opportunity to lead and deliver the work.
That's where it's like, to me, that's legalized labor trafficking, and it shouldn't be legal, and there needs to be more regulations there. So that's an overlap between multi-level marketing and personal development space, is like this lack of regulation, or these loopholes that they exist in that just seems so exploitative, because it's all with this false promise, when in reality they're banking on most people just doing free labor for a long time before they fall off. Like, that's what they're banking on. Because if everybody made it to the top, how would the owners be able to profit as handsomely as they are? They wouldn't be able to.
I heard on a podcast somewhere somebody else was talking about MLMs, and they did the math, and they said if you followed the model at 13 people doing what they were supposed to do in sales, you would have used up the population of the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's mathematically, it
And
doesn't
that
even work.
fact in and of itself should be enough to like shut it down, which is where, like, the fact that multi-level marketing spends more on government lobbying and like political donations than like Meta, Pfizer, and Goldman Sachs. Like, they're huge in terms of like political buying. So this is why it goes on. Some people say, well, it's not a pyramid scheme because pyramid schemes are illegal. It's like, well, it's corrupt and it's happening, but that doesn't, just because it's happening doesn't mean it's not corrupt. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be illegal. When you just take one simple fact, like exceeding the population of Earth, like it is mathematically impossible the promises to be delivered on. The other big overlap I see, which I think is really important, is how personal development, multi-level marketing teaches you to not trust yourself. Like, it's like this guise of self-empowerment, but you look at the case of like the James Arthur Ray situation, where these people literally passed away because they no longer knew where their intuition and their limitations bumped up against one another. They lost that.
Yeah, they don't know where that line is at all. Yeah, that's right. That's actually right. Well, and that's why I think I was so excited when I was coming up with the name of my book, and because I was like, abuse isn't what it's definitely experienced by people in the organization I was a part of, for sure, around Warner. That's what I reveal in my book. That's what had been revealed to me that had me start looking at it. And that was like the line. That was the red line. Wait, people are being physically harmed. It was quite shocking to find out that same behavior was happening in Landmark itself, which I did not find out until after my book came out. But to the degree to which it does, I'd still say it isn't, the physical assault isn't the most common, but it definitely happens and is tolerated. But then when I happened on that word exploitation, I was like, but now I've really started to study exploitation. What is exploitative? And I keep being surprised at what I even today don't recognize as exploitative. I just put something up on my Facebook the other day about, is being asked to work now, put in investment now for a possibility or of a future payoff. Is that exploitative? And because I was really looking at that for myself, because again, being in the sales field, I keep being offered these sales gigs, and that's pretty much what it looks like. That as compared to when I was in sales, like straight sales before, which, like I said, it was more traditional. Here's our showroom, here's our products, we're going to educate you. It was much cleaner. Now it's really snaky, and these really complicated commission packages that don't, are very challenging, and you're not being supplied leads. That was always my thing with Landmark. I'm like, okay, you're giving me targets. You want me to do a 10% increase year over year. That's supposed to be dependent on I deliver a fabulous program that everybody wants their friends to come to. Okay, got that. But I got to find all the leads, and never mind, I can't talk to people who haven't talked to us in more than 18 months because we don't want to violate the FTC rules. And I've long since exhausted my own address book. Like, where, and in my case, I wasn't supposed to take anything from the center's area. So if they wanted them to have them for a volunteer agreement, I couldn't sell them into my $3,000 profit making course. Totally back for business. It was crazy. But that's like, you're bringing all the resources, you're bringing the guests, you're bringing the infrastructure. I just now see, like, oh, It's exploitation. They're exploiting, extracting my resource for their gain.
Yeah. And your reputation and
Equity in
approachability
their
and
organization. And
in multi-level
because the
marketing.
other part, what about retirement and stuff? Because that's the other thing I've seen. So partially it's just longevity, right? So I got involved when I was like 27, 28, something like that, 29 maybe. And now I'm 56, but I'm engaging with a lot of ex leaders and staff and whatnot, and they're in their 70s and they can't live.
Yeah.
They can't support themselves.
Exactly. One of the people at the tippy top of my line had been in the company since the beginning. So she was in her late 70s or is in her late 70s. And that would be part of her rant. Like, I never want to retire. She was like very, very manic in her delivery.
That one, I've said that one.
I want to do this. Yeah. And it's like, you don't want to or you can't.
Right. Well, and you feel pretty differently when you're a lot older and tired and you can't keep up that 80 hours a week or whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I can see there's a lot of overlap here. Another one, somebody told me recently from our organization or from the Landmark, which is arguably one of the larger personal development companies. Although I heard recently the LifeSpring, which came up at the same time as us, but didn't get as popular, like didn't get as famous, but actually has more customers. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm sure that would drive them a little crazy. But one of the things that some of the leaders have relied on to bring people to the seminars, which are all ostensibly about personal performance, guess what one of their favorite groups to go to find customers for personal development?
Multi-level marketing.
MLM.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're already used to believing that our lack of success is our own limitation and we're already paying money that we don't have to unlock some mystery force within us. So we are ripe for the picking in multi-level marketing for personal development.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people do once they get to the top and they get maybe tired or bored of the monotony and the grind is they start offering coaching. And that's to me like, okay, you got to know though at that point, you got to know what you're doing at that point. And another thing that I put out was like an open letter to celebrities who promote multi-level marketing because I was like, that was a question that was so hard for me. Like, are they victims too? At what point does it change? At what point are you no longer a victim?
Mm-hmm.
How long can you wear blinders for? How long can a person just like bury their head in the sand? Like, does it vary depending on
Time, Brandy.
What's that? What's that?
Is it apparently a really long time?
Yeah, and like I wonder too about like one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and I wonder if this is an overlap, is in multi-level marketing, it seems to be that they're like deliberately the training is to induce narcissistic grandiosity, delusion, and disassociation. Like you're just like disconnected from your family, yourself, like I said in that situation with James Arthur Ray.
A very dear friend of mine who I would say I've been doing my deconstructing with. She was a seminar leader. We've been friends, 25 years. We've raised our kids together and whatnot. And she basically helped me write my book. And because I only had a few people that I could talk to safely. And by safely, I don't mean for my safety, I mean for their safety. Mm-hmm. Because I was like, no, I mean, I knew how I was reeling from finding the information out that I was finding out. And I didn't want to subject other people to that.
Exactly.
I didn't want to, and I've now talked to a lot of like center managers, like people in the kind of I would say the hottest of the hot seats inside of that in the organization. So the organization Landmark is very much organized MLM-ish. Mm-hmm. And anyway, and they said, a number of them have said to me that they even stayed in the positions to protect the graduates. Mm-hmm. So that's this instinct. Like, okay, we're going to protect the graduates. We don't want to take away their transformation. We don't want to take away the thing. Mm-hmm. So anyway, my dear friend and I, we're like going through and we're like reading, we're watching The Vow and we're watching Twin Flames and we're like watching all these documentaries and talking. And then we got, it was actually a reporter that introduced me to the book Outrageous Betrayal, which is the only, other than my book, is the only other non-authorized book talking about Landmark mm-hmm. or its predecessors, Asplin or any of that. Mm-hmm. And all the books out there, those are all by authorized. I mean, they were supported by Landmark and or leaders, which means they're heavily influenced by that. So one day she calls me up. She's like, "Oh my God, they've been training us to be narcissistic sociopaths. It's all about me and my power, and I'm the
Yeah.
source of everything. Da, 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 da. Except for it's all these double binds. I'm the source of everything, but only through landmark, only because of landmark.
Yeah.
You know, same thing, only because I take these supplements or I do this thing, you know, whatever the thing is. And then, so it's got this whole narcissism thing, and the human potential movement now, as it's been studied, because it's been, you know, it's gone on and it's been studied in the academic circles, is for short called the me movement. Because it really put everything on me, but in this really not in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And then stripped all the spirituality out of it. I had a reporter tell me that. I thought that was, he goes, I think I'm figuring this out. He's reported on a number of different groups. He goes, I think I'm figuring out. It's like they take all the stuff from spirituality, but take all the spirit out of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they just boil it down to these sort of agnostic practices and then hype it all up with these crazy sales things. And then, yeah, and you are taught to disassociate very much because your feelings in landmark language, that's what's going on with you internally. And that's what you need to bracket, put aside in order to be effective and productive. And then they have tools for that, like create your declarations and then just this model of integrity where you just do your word and blah, 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 blah. Like this whole system. But that system inherently does disassociate you from your intuition, from your emotions, you know, and then that's aided by our modern society, which is like emotions are what you have to get over. You know, I mean, that's reinforced.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely a big, I think they use personal development basically to keep people in the MLM game.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they use these trainings and force and support this business.
And scripture too. I mean, depending, like MLMs, different MLMs have different flavors. Some are more like evangelical, some are more like woo woo and law of attraction. So but it all has like this common thread of you create your reality, therefore you are ultimately to blame. The company is to thank, and your lack is you. It's your mindset. It's yeah. It's like even in Twin Flames, like mirror work. It's like the same idea.
So so you got out and you got, you know, separated and whatnot. And just how has that been for you? So how's that been to sort of wake up and study this stuff? Like what led you, because you really become a voice and an advocate to call this stuff out. Why'd you do that? You didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Well, I really resonated with what Sarah Edmondson had to say about this because she said, like, I was shouting from the rooftops and I just felt like I had to at least match the effort that I put on building up Nexium to share the truth about Nexium. So I feel a similar, like whatever that is psychologically that we have in common, I feel that similar drive that not everybody has, and it's just a personal thing. Yeah. But at first, like the first chapter of my getting out, as I said, was like doing childcare. And that was such a grounding experience because instead of prospecting, like to be like, have all of that off of my shoulders, that I no longer have to look at people as potentials, as prospects, was like so freeing. And then to spend my time with like a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old that I was taking care of at the time, plus my own kids, it was like, you know, especially the 3-year-old at the time, they're in this precious like zone of like just slow and deliberate, and I want to do it. And so that you have to be patient and present. And so it really connected me to the present moment and to reality. It was like I needed like some accountability to be present. And that's what the kids were for me during that period. Wow. So that was like beautiful. Like I'll always look back at that chapter with such gratitude. And then, you know, connecting to myself, one day it was like, you're supposed to be a therapist, remember? And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I was supposed to do. Because in multi-level marketing, like one of the things is like, it's not just the financial loss that you take and the time loss and the isolating from everybody, including yourself, but it's also like the putting your education on the back burner, which is what I did. Mm-hmm. So now I'm finding myself having to go back to school in my 40s so that I can have the actual like appropriate credential to do the work that I always wanted to do anyway. and feel like I'm
Wow.
practicing in my scope, because in multi-level marketing, without these regulations, you're just like so out of scope. You're so inappropriate and boundary crossing and boundaryless. Like, so that has been like, because I think because I've gone through what I've gone through, it allowed me, like, if I'm to look for a silver lining, it allowed me to approach school with so much gratitude and presence, because I'm like I'm taking my life back, and
Nice.
I'm seeing like what ethical leadership can look like, and it feels so safe. So it's funny because ultimately people will have complaints or things they want to improve, but I feel like I'm riding it with like rose colored glasses because of my previous experience.
Oh my God, you have no idea how good this is for me to hear today, actually, because I've been really struggling with, I closed a business when I went on staff, became a full-time leader for Landmark. Um, and that's not really a business I'm going to go back to. A little bit through our real estate stuff. I had a building supply business where I helped people building their homes, pick out all their stuff. So love that. But I'm telling you, I'm loving this writing thing. Really. I mean, when I was writing my book, I was like, whoa, I like this. I like content creation, so to speak, because did you feel that's interesting? I'd forgotten Sarah said that, but like shouting from the rooftops. I've also felt, and I feel like that's the same thing that got me so excited about Landmark, was I wanted to make a difference. So I still have that. It's just now I have different information. I feel like, to me, I was complicit if I didn't tell.
Exactly. Yeah.
I kept trying to get rid of it without telling, actually, but it wasn't working. And then I was seeing things evolve to where more and more and more people were going to be hurt financially, mostly because of some decisions that Landmark was making. But so I'm like, I have to warn them. I have to warn them. These people I just spent 26 years of my life, this community, I have to warn, I have to tell them. I don't think I could sleep if I didn't. That comes with its own challenges. Have you experienced any of that, like any challenges or like backlash that's been challenging? What's been the most challenging aspect of speaking up?
Yeah. It surprised me because it hasn't come from the direction that I thought that it would come from. I've had some surprising, weird encounters. I had, like, for example, somebody who was like, I now know what it feels like to have boundaries. And so I'm noticing, sometimes people crossing those where I would have been putty in their hands. And now I'm like, no, like, this isn't how I'm going to live anymore.
I'm just discovering this myself. Yes. I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah. And so that's been interesting because I've had a couple instances where I've tried to establish boundaries, and then the other person gets really angry and tries to attack. So navigating that's been challenging because it's like recently there was a person who just wanted me to talk about different issues. It's kind of like the whataboutism, like, what about this and what about this? And it's like, if you feel passionate about something, you have a platform, go make some content about it. Like, I'm very much allergic to people telling me what I need to consider as, I don't think that multi-level marketing is the biggest problem in the world. And I've never said it's the biggest problem. It's my story and it's what I'm talking about. And so if anybody tries to make it something that it's not, or get me to react or whatever, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And so that's been interesting. It's like flying monkeys where I'm not expecting them to come from, because it's not necessarily within multi-level marketing. It's just other people who've taken an interest for whatever.
Kind of projecting their thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Gotcha. Well, Brandy, thank you so much. I think it's a good spot for us to pause. I have a suspicion we'll be talking again. I'm super excited I want to get you connected up with the folks at Seek Safely.
Yes, I love them. I was talking about them on another podcast recently.
Yeah, no. Well, I was on a board meeting last night, just as a guest. Kind of, I've really taken on, like, okay, what you guys are doing is so important, because a couple things for me that's so important about that. And it's been very healing to have that, to put all of my culty training to work to really support something that I think is super worthwhile, which is very much why I'm involved with them. But that one, they are standing for legislation. So getting first ever consumer protection legislation that is directed at the personal development and wellness field. Because that's the other thing. See, a lot of these MLMs are the business structure for the wellness products, right? And that's where a lot of exploitation and harm comes in. And then, so that kind of thing. But also, what I love is they have a respect for the role of self help. It has an important place and role in our society. Like, not everybody is going to resonate with a therapist or has the resources to have one.
Right.
Therapeutic models aren't always the right thing at the right time for people. I mean, I've seen that as well. So it has an important role to play. And for me, I think those of us that have been in that world and have been willing to step up to the line and look at both the helpful and harmful sides are the absolute best people to help evolve whatever systems and structures we can to the next level. So I consider you as part of that team.
Amazing.
And really appreciate your time today. And we'll link all this stuff in the show notes, but what are some things where people, if they want to connect to you? I got your Substack. I didn't even know about your Substack. I'm going to go sign up for that. I'm excited. But is there anything else that you would like folks to know that you are creating or have available to?
Yeah, so I do a lot of writing on like long form content on Substack. And then on my Instagram, I like to make satire and just have fun.
Oh my God, Yigal, he's so good. Your Instagram, your videos that you did one recently, I can't even remember what it was about, but I was rolling. It was hilarious.
And then I also started a nonprofit called Flipping the Pyramid, which is a commercial cults peer support group. So right now we meet monthly to talk and support one another on Zoom. So that happens the second Tuesday of every month currently at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's really cool because we've even got people from like Australia, New Zealand, like there's quite a burgeoning community out there, which is really cool.
Wow. That's really awesome. Well, we'll make sure to connect all that in the show notes and probably even put up on the resources guides on is this a cult book.com, which is my book website. So that's really great. That's really important. I love that you're doing that, flipping the pyramid, because I know, anyway, I'm going to be sending some people your direction, actually, that have been deeply involved in that very specific thing. It's for those of you out there that are listening and some of the stuff's familiar, you're kind of like, I think maybe I've been involved in that and I don't quite know what to do. I don't quite know. The very first question, I love my friend Brian Nord asked it, how did I get here? What's happening? And so if you've been involved in some kind of a direct sales or MLM program that you suspect has not been helpful, has not been as healthy for you as you thought it was, would definitely encourage you to get in conversation with people like Brandy that have that direct experience. And then also along that line, we are going to continue to promote and we are hosting our Healthy Healing group for people who have been a part of high control groups or relationships, whether it's an employment situation, personal development, or even a relationship with Rachel Bernstein. So for anybody listening out there, if any of this resonated with you, please plug into these resources, check the show notes and get connected. You're not alone and it's not your fault.
Thank you.
So thanks, everybody. This has been Confronting the Line. And if you'd like to continue the conversation and know more, in addition to the show notes, you can check out isthisoccultbook.com, where we are putting up all the resources and various connections to help people out who are exploring and investigating, confronting their own lines. Thank you very much.